Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me now? Great. Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for letting me speak. I This is actually more interesting than usual because I'm seeing the camera feed from behind, and I'm seeing all of you and the Eiffel Tower at the same time. So I sort of kind of feel I'm there looking at the Eiffel Tower also. So that's a nice feeling. Uh, My colleague Jeff is in the audience. If Jeff, do you want to raise your hand? Where are you? Great. So I am not in Paris, but my colleague Jeff is in Paris. So if you'd like to chat to Jeff, chat with Jeff. He's right there. So I think I have about 20 minutes. I am going to speak as usual a little bit conceptually. And some of you who have heard me before, there might be some overlap with some things I've said before. I think there might be some new things. In any case, I am going to try in this direction. So let's go back to the beginning for a second. And the beginning for all these topics is Bitcoin. And what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin solved one very specific and important problem. And it is a decentralized database, which sounds, if you had discussed this 10 years ago with someone, you might say, oh, well, why is this a big deal? Why does this matter? This sounds strange. But it's actually a gigantic deal because all of modern society is intermediated by databases. There is no functioning modern society without databases. Where you stay in a hotel, where you vote, what Uber you get into, how much money is in your bank account, are you allowed to enter NFT Paris? All of this is somehow, some way in a database, and databases are great. It's why we have an advanced modern society. But those databases have progressively centralized. We are much, much more centralized than we were 20 years ago on both the financial and the non-financial domain. On the financial domain, it's very clear, it's very obvious, there is a form of war on cash. This started post 9/11. It is continuing to accelerate. It's actually more accelerated in Europe than it is in the United States. There are many countries now where you cannot withdraw above a certain amount of cash. You cannot pay above a certain amount of cash. Cash is decentralized, of course. And the payment system, the core payment system, is moving to a centralized system, even in absence of a central bank digital currency. There is a general belief that, and let's say for well-intentioned reasons, right? The drug trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion, but there's a general belief that it is better that payments go through trusted intermediaries, banks, payments processors, etc., where they can be monitored and or blocked. And this is of the type of societal problem that is good in the short term. It improves society in the short term, most likely, but has risks that someday it creates a level of centralized power that will be used for something much worse than, drug dealing. So that's clearly happening on the financial side, but it's also happening on the everything else side. An example I like to use, I used to live in New York, and you used to hail a taxi by standing on the street and throwing your hand up, and the taxi driver stops, and you jump in and you give them $20 and you go to your destination. And was there any way to block me from taking a taxi? Not really. I'd have to be arrested and in jail, I think. Like a certain individual taxi driver might decide not to take me. That's fine. I would just wait for the next one. And then we got Uber and Lyft and now the New York City taxi app. And that's great. They're very useful and more convenient. And I think now they have like 80% market share. And if Uber decides they don't want you on their platform, they just press a button and you can't use their platform. And no Uber will pick you up. And not only no Uber will pick you up in New York, no Uber will pick you up in Paris and London and San Francisco and Miami and anywhere else. So taxis, which you might not think of this, right? Taxis have gone from being a globally decentralized system to being mostly a centralized system, and mostly a centralized system run by two corporations. And because Uber is a private company with a private database, you have no constitutional rights to use Uber's database. They don't want you as a customer, you're not a customer. But it's an odd outcome that if for whatever reason Uber and Lyft don't want you as a customer, 80% of the world's taxis are no longer available to you. It's an odd outcome. And this is happening in everything. It's happening in search, it's happening in social media. It will accelerate with artificial intelligence because the foundation models will be centralized and the use of the foundation models will be centralized and so on. So in this context, it was quite important that someone invented a way that you can have a database that tracks, in this case, fungible objects, and nobody's in charge. And that database was Bitcoin and the whole set of fungible platforms that came after that. And this was extremely useful. Arguably, possibly critical to the freedom of the world over time, that we can operate in a digital world decentralized. And there's one minor issue there. Last time I think I'm going to say databases. Bitcoin is a fantastic database for applications that only use numbers. There is no way natively to write word 6529 in the core protocol, right? It's the core protocol is a number, a lot of digits, decimal points, but it's a number. And this is true of all the fungible tokens. And it's very, very useful if you are a database developer and your database it only have numbers and it can't have text and it can't have images, and it can't have videos, it can't have arrays, it can't have a whole variety of things, right? And then you say, okay, hold up thought. And to me, it's why we haven't seen social applications really developed on the crypto networks, even a decade later. Applications are almost exclusively financial. Until NFTs, right? And NFTs are one of those ideas that is so simple, so unbelievably simple, that people underestimate how important they are. And what are NFTs, right? They are non-fungible tokens. Okay, fine, everyone knows that. That can store any type of arbitrary data. Not just an image or a video, but any type of other arbitrary data just carried along in the metadata. You can represent in an NFT literally anything that can be in any type of database, not just a financial database. What this means is this unlocks, as a platform, as a use case, all of the other things we use databases for, which is everything, right? This is the right format for decentralizing everything else. Everything else is actually bigger than money. It's bigger than currency. Right? And where it will start is where it has started. It's where what is happening today in NFT Paris is in the intangible space, just like Bitcoin is also intangible. Right? And it has to be in the intangible space because it is natively on-chain. Anything that is in the physical world is not permissionless. It needs a bridge. And so we will start in the intangible space. And it started effectively in art. And it's kind of amazing what is happening in art because it is the first time we have had a global open art transactional database of any type. In the financial world, you said, banks and SWIFTs and what have you have some type of global network for moving money around. But in the art world, there was no global network for moving art around. But art is just the beginning. Art is the beginning. We're just at the beginning of art being transported of NFTs, and we're also just at the beginning of everything else being transported with NFTs. We will see a lot of talk around the Bitcoin ETF of what the potential market cap is of Bitcoin, right? And the example they're going to say is gold is $10 trillion and Bitcoin is $1 trillion. Or the money supply of the United States is 20 trillion and Bitcoin's 1 trillion. But intangibles are something like 80 trillion. Intangibles, non-financial intangibles are something like 80 trillion. It is at least just the intangible aspect of what can be moved around, the intangible aspect of society, which can now be moved around on a blockchain, is at least as large as the financial and arguably bigger. And that is before you get to things that are a decade out, which are non-fungible tangibles. I'll leave that aside. Let's focus on what we can do this decade. And so what this means is we will have obviously a lot more art on blockchains, but also any other type of social intangibles. But what's a social intangible? Well, everything from brands, human relationships, roles, structures, social graphs, social networks, all of these things are now feasible on a global, open, permissionless model. And I'm going to go a little bit technical here because I think you sometimes hear objections of this type. You say, well, okay, 6529, is the metadata really on chain, right? You have this NFT, it points to IPFS, ideally not to someone's server, right? IPFS or Arweave. And it's not on chain. And I'm going to say, well, that's obviously true. I think it actually doesn't matter that much because if it's in a decentralized storage service, anyone can build an application that can read that data and interact with that data. It is still open. It is still permissionless. And Arweave and IPFS have reasonably robust long-term security models. And in IPFS particularly, you can just decide to pin it yourself. And you say, okay, yeah, but it's still off-chain. And so, fine. And one of the things we're going to demonstrate this year, we launched a series of smart contracts called NextGen a couple weeks ago. And we did a drop of generative art with Z-blocks. And it's on-chain generative art in the normal way that people understand it. And the outputs are fantastic. And Arsenic and Sebi are super. And it's a beautiful drop. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the NextGen contract allows for the metadata to just be a function call on chain. So you can create a collection, an NFT, a series of NFTs. You can embed information about the world at large in those NFTs. You can embed it in the metadata, and you can return the metadata as a function call on the Ethereum virtual machine. No IPFS, no Arweave. IPFS and Arweave are decentralized. What NextGen is not only decentralized, but composable within the Ethereum virtual machine. What it means is you can have a smart contract that can interact with it directly in the Ethereum virtual machine. And there are two ways to think about this. One, it's going to allow you to do some very interesting artistic, the blockchain as part of the art part. It's going to be amazing. But the other thing we want to explore is to proof of concept this concept. What is this concept? That NFTs can be used to more broadly organize large social structures, more broadly organize things at the human level, at the social and the human level. And it is important if we want to have a long-term decentralized society, it is important that we can organize all these topics in a decentralized manner as well, right? Because I don't know about you, maybe you're different, but I consider myself a decentralization maxi, and I hold my cryptocurrency on chain. I own my keys. My keys and my coins are the same. This is wonderful. However, I'm speaking to you through Zoom, which is centralized. I have Gmail and Outlook, which is centralized. I use Twitter, which is centralized. I use Instagram, which is centralized. Facebook, Microsoft Office, Google Apps, Uber, Lyft, etc., etc., etc. My day-to-day life would utterly collapse if you took the centralized part out of it. Right? I'd have the ability to transact in Bitcoin, and I'd have the ability to move around some NFTs. So yes, I'm decentralized and permissionless there. And even me, I am decentralized and permissionless effectively nowhere else. And so I think over the period of years, this is a years, not months, over the period of this decade, it is going to be important to see how we can bring on-chain and permissionless a broader set of activities. One of the happiest outcomes for me, one of the most unusual outcomes, is that it appears that the leading edge of this, what is going to push this through, is art. It's a beautiful outcome because crypto up till now targets one set of values, norms, side of your brain. It's I think, left side of your brain type activity. The fact that we will now be able to expand on the mission in using the right side of the brain, using a different set of social norms, values, qualia, is super interesting. I wouldn't have predicted it a few years ago. I didn't even have it on my radar screen as a pathway. But I actually think art and NFTs and art on NFTs is actually going to help us not only build a broader global community of artists and art collectors, but actually build out decentralized social infrastructure that complements the financial and fungible social infrastructure. So I think, looking at the clock, I might be out of time. If I'm not, I'll keep going, but I want to be respectful of the schedule. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. If I'm out of time, I can't hear anyone saying something to me, so I don't know. Thank you so much.